Hi and welcome. Well, working smarter rather than harder requires you to be strategic about how you manage your time as a student. Many of our students also have placement hours to complete, other employment, and families to look after too. So, how can you organise your week or semester more efficiently? And how can you take advantage of the times when you feel most productive? Here are 10 tips to get more done in a shorter period of time whilst meeting your academic, professional, and personal commitments. So, the first tip is to set daily and weekly goals. In other words, create a plan. What do you need to accomplish by the end of the week? And what do you have to do each day to make that happen? Don't forget to use the Eisenhower matrix to help establish your priorities and commit to your weekly and daily goals by making sure that they're realistic. It's easier to just focus on a few goals per day or per week than it is on lots. Setting daily and weekly goals can help you establish priorities, determine what's essential, and then help you plan your day, week, or semester accordingly. It's worth remembering that whilst some activities need to be completed at set times, so for example lectures, others can be completed at a time that works for you. So it's important to be flexible. You may find that you work on some of your days when you don't have lectures and instead may need to complete some of the other activities at the weekend, for example. You may also need to review and prioritise your academic goals with your professional and personal commitments too. And that leads us into our next tip, and that's to tackle your top priorities first. Once you've established when your non-negotiable activities need to be scheduled in, such as attending lectures, going to work, or family commitments, use the rest of your time to tackle your top priorities first. That means resisting the urge to knock out a few easy wins before tackling your most audacious goals for the day. Instead, do your work in order of priority, and that means starting with your most important tasks of the day, even if they're also the most daunting or overwhelming tasks. Our third tip is to group similar tasks and avoid multitasking. So, for example, avoid checking your email or Instagram apps or social media every time you receive a notification. Instead, schedule a set time each day that's devoted entirely to this. Perhaps in your breaks, consider turning your phone on airplane mode. Make the most of your time by going to the library and locating books that you need for each of your modules in one go, rather than making lots of frequent visits, which also require travel. Finally, avoid multitasking or task switching. Instead, work on one task at a time. By grouping similar tasks and avoiding multitasking, you can decrease your cognitive load and increase your efficiency. The fourth tip is to schedule everything in your day using an online calendar and set notifications on your devices to remind you. Schedule your lectures, tutorials, study activities, work commitments, travel, and personal commitments. And of course, don't forget to schedule your assignment dates and leave plenty of time to start preparing and writing these. Set your notifications with plenty of notice to get started. This should be a task for as soon as you've received your module guides. You do, though, need to be flexible with scheduling, because while some tasks can be scheduled and repeated weekly in advance, some will change, and therefore you need to review these regularly, at least once a week. Consider sharing your calendar with members of your household so they also understand what your commitments are too. Many of our students are working parents, and this can help avoid, for example, holidays being booked near to assignment submission dates or being offered help with a school run on lecture days, for example. The more that you find that you block off your calendar, the easier it will be to protect the time that you need to devote to your most important and urgent goals. But don't forget to set time limits, which is our fifth tip. Determine how long you want to spend on a task and stick to it. Set a timer or a stopwatch if needed. There are other ways to set limits that can be just as effective as a student, which can also include setting limits on the time spent on activities, the number of journal articles read, the number of pages or chapters read in a book, or the number of words written, for example. Setting limits can also create a sense of urgency, which can help focus your attention and cut out distractions. They can also combat overthinking, procrastination, and analytical paralysis. And speaking of scheduling everything, also use your online calendar to schedule regular breaks, which is our sixth tip. Whilst it might sound quite counterintuitive, taking regular breaks can actually increase productivity and creativity. In contrast, working long stretches without breaks may slow you down and lead to mental exhaustion over time. Try out the Pomodoro technique to help remain focused, and which will also remind you to take regular breaks. Usually the focus is on 3 lots of 25-minute sessions with 5-minute breaks followed by a longer break. And there's loads of apps that can help you with this. Just search your app store and find one that works for you. But when you do take a break, remember to move away from your study space, particularly if you're working on a digital device. And remember, our 7th tip is important, and that's to avoid distractions. Simple techniques to help limit being distracted include getting organised. So being organised can help avoid being distracted by trying to find notes and reading material. Make sure that you have set up an electronic folder for each of your modules to file all of your work. You might have paper folders as well. You may also want to create subfolders for each week or different topics. Similarly, consider using Microsoft OneNote to help you collate all of your notes, reading notes, reference lists all together, or any other study apps that might help you as well. In terms of phones and social media, then it's already been mentioned, but consider turning your devices to airplane mode or turn notifications off. Use the Pomodoro technique to help schedule breaks, and then you've got time to plug back in. Find a quiet space. Make sure that you have everything that you need and that it's easily accessible. Comfort's also important, so make sure that your chair, desk, monitor or device are all set at the right level for your height. If this is difficult, find a space in the library or find a dedicated study room. If you live further away, then consider trying your local library. It's also important to manage expectations. So by letting your household know that you're taking time out to study, you're less likely to be disturbed. So shut the door if you can and agree a time when you're going to rejoin everyone. It's also important to learn to say no. And that can really be quite difficult for people. It's easy to agree to do more hours at work or meet up for coffee with friends. But if you do that, make a deal with yourself that you'll catch up earlier in the morning for the next day, for example. If you find that you can't make up for lost time, it's important to learn to say no. You've got your inter-semester breaks and holiday periods that are never far away when you can do all your catching up too. Our 8th tip is to determine your prime time. Many of the activities that you undertake will be outside of timetable lectures, so it's important to determine your prime time. In other words, the time of the day that you are at your most productive. And you can identify this by answering the following questions. When do you feel most energised or motivated to study? When do you do your best work? And what hours of the day are you most productive? Are there any times during the day when your energy or motivation levels drop? And when am I least distracted? Most of us have certain hours or times of the day when we're more or less productive, motivated and energised. You might be a morning person. Maybe you notice a post-lunch energy slump, or perhaps your motivation levels spike later in the evening. Regardless of when this is, determine your prime time and maximise it. Block or protect your prime time in your schedule and focus on your most challenging and cognitive consuming activities when you're feeling your best, and leave your least productive time to dealing with simple activities such as organising notes or attending to emails. The 9th tip is to check out the current useful apps and software that students are using to make their studies easier. There are a number of study productivity apps, timers, Pomodoro apps, to-do lists, which can make your life so much easier. And finally, one of the most important tips is to remember to be kind to yourselves. You're on your own journey, and this will be very individual to your own circumstances. Some students will be able to find study more easier than others, and it really will depend on their own personal and professional commitments alongside those of an academic nature. You do have to find a balance that works well for you, and don't forget to reward yourself once in a while when you've achieved your goals. And this can be as simple as making a cup of tea, listening to music or taking a walk outside. Just find your happy place. So I hope these 10 time management tips will help you achieve your goals and decrease the amount of time it takes to do this. Wish you all the very best with achieving your ambitions, and thank you for listening.